happy to be here on this steamy day together, but at least we're cool inside. My name is Leanne Chivowley. I'm Director of Programming at Village Preservation. And in case you don't know Village Preservation, we have been around since the 80s preserving our history, our culture, the architecture, the built space of Greenwich Village, East Village, and NoHo, so those are our areas. We do this through membership, through support from people like you, so if you want to find out more, there is a QR code on the slides. If you want to take a picture, QR codes are back. So feel free to learn more. Go to villagepreservation.org/membership and find out more. And we do things like this. We just had a rock tour of the village. We have tomorrow a free webinar on redistricting. There's still room if you want to sign up for that. And then our August and fall programming will be coming soon. So please check those things out. We also, if you see in the newsletter, we are very involved in advocacy work in the neighborhood, so please check us out about that. And also do a lot of support for our small businesses in the neighborhood. So, but today we're here to talk about education, history, and the built space of this building. And we're so happy to have Eileen, who's the director of the Little Missionary Day Nursery School, here to talk us through some of this history and learn a little bit more about Sara Curry. I know you picked up your books, which is a really nice added bonus, and so I'll just turn it over to Eileen. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll do a tour of the space after the lecture, so thank you so much. Thanks, Eileen.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you for coming, everybody. It's hard to know where to start with this topic. There's so much to it, you know. I thought I'd start by just telling you what, thank you.
Yeah.
I thought I'd start by just telling you how I became interested in Sara Curry. I also am nut about old things. I love old things. I love yard sales. I love old buildings. I'm looking at old buildings. I'm not sure why. I know that I see nodding. Everyone's nodding. I don't know what that is, but you know, we all love it and we want to keep part of the past. But I thought I'd read to you before we start the actual slideshow. I have written a novel. I'm in the second draft now. The novel is it's called The House on St. Mark's Place. And the novel has alternating chapters. One chapter is about a fictional school director who arrives in a building and becomes enchanted with the building and finds out more and more about the past. And the other chapters are about the fictional person who started the nursery. And it's based loosely on myself and Sara Curry, who is a constant inspiration to me. Her portrait is in the hall, and I look at it all the time when things go wrong around here, and she always helps me out. So this is fiction, but pretty close to what actually happened. And this is about 20 years ago. I came on an interview here, and the building was not, you know, it was a gorgeous building, but it was not really cared for various reasons. It was shabby. There were 8 children left here, but as soon as I walked in here, I fell in love with it. They weren't offering much of a salary at all. They actually had another offer, but I took it because I fell in love with the place. So, and it's been a good marriage for the past 20 years. So I'm going to read the first 2 chapters of my novel. I knew you were mature from the sound of your voice on the phone. I told the board you would be. She knew what the old woman meant by mature, and a few choice responses came to her instantly, but this was a job interview, so she just responded brightly, I see. Sara actually didn't feel old at all. 42 was just a number, and besides, for a single mom of 2, she knew she didn't look her age. The woman's pinched face did not change expression, and her steady eyes stayed on her potential employee. Sara quickly made up her mind not to take the job. She was scheduled for another nursery school directorship interview anyway, maybe for a higher salary. Besides, she's heard some negative things about this place. It was possibly going out of business, on its last legs, some bad vibes, teachers quitting. I'll show you around, the woman said, and she rose up, tiny and thin, pushing herself up by pressing her knuckles on the small child's table in a way that showed she was tougher than she looked. The huge poodle rose from its sitting position beside her and loped towards Sara. She never knew a poodle could be intimidating, but this off-white one was like a big disgruntled ghost. It dominated the narrow corridor of the old brownstone building, its shoulders bunching up and down as it came closer. Of course, the old woman did nothing when the dog insisted on sticking its nose into Sarah's crotch. At this point, it felt like there was no backing out of the tour, so she followed the woman and the dog from the basement up through the narrow wooden staircase to the first floor. Mrs. Cantwell opened the door to the classroom, and Sarah stepped into a huge, high-ceilinged room with great windows looking out onto the street. The space was filled with August afternoon light and smelled of paint and warm, musty books. "We've just been painting the cubbies," the woman said. "The place needs some cheering up. This past year was not great for us, but we're moving ahead." The cubbies were lined up on sheets of newspaper, painted a frantic shade of green that screamed cheerfulness, but was in fact depressing. The old woman stooped down and picked up a worn rug woven from brown and what used to be orange threads. "I'll take this rug home. There's just a small hole here that needs to be fixed. I found it on the street. Isn't it wonderful? We're working on a very tight budget, you know. I do what I can. Sometimes I think if it wasn't for me..." Sarah wasn't listening to her as they walked around the building. She was busy admiring the white plaster sunflowers around the ceiling lights, the carved marble fireplaces, the tall windows. In the kitchen there was an old ceramic sink that was closed over with a sheet of buckled plywood, and beside that a window looking out onto the backyard. She thought how lovely the old sink was, and for a second she pictured someone from long ago washing dishes and looking out the window into the back garden as she worked. "The sink doesn't work?" she asked. "Oh, that's just old. We covered it over," said the woman. "We're going to replace it with something more modern when we can afford." "You have a slight accent. Are you of Irish descent?" she asked. "Mm-hmm," Sarah answered. "What are your people?" Sarah had to bite her tongue again. She wanted to say leprechauns, but she just answered, "My father was a clerk, humble beginnings." "Oh, I see. Our founder was Irish too." Sarah knew she was in for another "aren't Irish people quaint" conversation. "Founder?" she asked to be polite. Founder stories were usually boring. "Viola Armstrong," she said, "turn of the last century. She's the one who started all this. Here, let's go to the office where we can talk." Sarah followed her out into the wide hallway again. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught something gleam on the first landing of the wide staircase. A quick flash or sudden movement. She turned her head quickly to see what it was, but realized she must have been mistaken. There was nothing to see except a long mirror at the turning of the stairs, and it was probably just a reflection of light entering the building through the fanlights, just as it had done so many times before. Chapter 2. "Help! Over here, please!" Viola heard someone shouting as she turned the corner onto the narrow cobbled street. "The poor thing, he's hurt!" A heavy-set woman wearing a black shawl was leaning over the body of a little boy lying on the sidewalk. People passed by, some of them slowing down and staring, but all of them continuing to walk. Viola had been in the city only a week now, living at a boarding house on East 10th Street, and she had already seen enough misery to make her want to leave and go back to her home upstate. "What happened?" Viola asked. The woman looked at her with dead eyes. "Another one of them street urchins," she said, clutching her shopping basket close to herself. "God love them, running around in the streets like wild animals while their parents are at work. This one ran out in front of a horse and cart. I have to be on my way." She shook her head as she walked off. She had called for help, and now that Viola was there, she left her alone with the child and scurried away. Viola looked around her. No one seemed to care what happened to the little boy. She had been left to fend for herself from an early age, and she couldn't bear to think that no one would come over to help this child. What kind of city is New York? She bent down and scooped him up in her arms. She was small herself, but he hardly weighed a thing. He was only 3 or 4 years old, and he wasn't wearing shoes, just a torn shirt and oversized pants. His face was dirty and his hair tangled, and dark red blood on the side of his forehead dripped down into his ear. Viola passed Tompkins Square Park. It was mid-afternoon and the sun beat down on her back, but she ignored the intense heat and kept walking. All the problems and worries of her first few weeks in the big city now slipped into the background. All she could think about was this child in her arms and the need to take care of him. A thought flashed through her head. What am I doing? How can I take care of this boy when I could barely take care of myself? Her first month had been a real struggle because she only had a little savings and she'd been relying on bringing home sewing to pay the rent. She learned how to sew at the factory upstate, and she was glad she had a way to support herself in the city where there was hope for building a new life. An old man sitting on a bench stared at her as she passed, and a group of women with babies and prams entering the park whispered to each other as they watched, but no one said a word to her or offered to help. She looked down at the boy's face. His eyes didn't open, but she could hear his breathing. His bony arm dangled over and flopped around as she walked home with him. She remembered the stray dog she'd hidden under her bed when she was a little girl, and how her mother had thrown the dog out in the middle of winter. "We have barely enough for ourselves," she'd insisted, and Viola had run out into the darkness to find him, only returning without the dog when she was numb with cold and her hands and feet hurt. She'd cried herself to sleep that night, and she'd never forgiven her mother for taking away the animal she'd fallen in love with. She remembered that lost dog now as the sun heated her black hat and her black coat, and she gained strength from the memory and held on tight to the child she had at home. She was determined that she would take care of him no matter what. When she got back to the boarding house, she laid the little boy down on the bed and went to get a washcloth. And that is actually a true story.
Oh, really?
That is actually a true story. And it's in the book that that wonderful woman, Laura Perkins from upstate New York, Utica, put together. That's a true story about the little boy, embellished a little bit. So now, let's take a look at this. These were conditions in New York City in 1900. I don't know if any of you have read How the Other Half Lives by Jacob Riis. If you haven't, you really should, because that book shows the plight of children in New York City was, especially down in this area here, in poor areas, was absolutely horrifying. Parents couldn't afford to take care of children, often just left them out in the street. And when they did have work, they would either tie them onto balconies, lock them in the apartment in the winter, or let them wander around in the streets during the day. And Jacob Riis shone a light on that situation, and it's really a great book and worth reading. I'm sorry I forgot to put in the reference of where I found this, but I'll just read it out real quick for you. The hazardous conditions that working class children had to endure first caught the attention of reformers during the progressive era of the early 1900s. To remedy the problem, social reformers and legislators developed an idea: mother's pensions. This policy solution provided state aid to women with young children who lacked male support. The intention was to encourage mothers to stay home with their children, but the initiative was plagued by problems. The pensions tended to be meager, and local eligibility requirements opened the door to discrimination. Since pension coverage was unreliable, maternal employment increased. Women had to work over the course of the early 20th century, fueling the need for childcare. Still, because mothers' pensions were dominating the social arena, there was no chance of obtaining public funding for daycare. So now, so now we're going to take a look at some of the material that I found. So I'll just show you what I found upstairs. This is a sample of some of the other, I have 40 to 50 books upstairs, and I can't pass them around, they're fragile. They're also kind of dirty, the dirt never really comes off them. So they're actual records of the children, the addresses, the parents, how much money they gave, and so on and so on. I just don't know what to do, it's just a treasure.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm gonna
What years?
Okay, so this one's in better shape, it's 1943, this one, but I have them going all the way back to 1903 and 1904. And it's particularly interesting, the ones from around the Slocum disaster, the 1904, because a lot of children of that time came here. So, you know, Sarah, yes, sorry, question here. Yes.
I was just wondering what, the early part of the century, what the names, are they all different kinds of
We're
animals?
going to get to that.
I'm sorry.
I'm glad you're asking. I think that, did you guys want to be detectives when you were kids? I did. It's fascinating. And actually, just preparing this talk for you tonight, I learned a whole bunch of new stuff. So we know who Sara Curry was, do we know? I'll just briefly tell you, she was born in Long Island. It's a big family, and her parents died. So she was sort of in charge of the other kids. But she then went to Utica, you'll read this in the book, and she worked in a factory, and she organized women there, and she tried to, start a little nursery arrangement there too. And then she came to New York, and the building was donated to her. I'm going to show you the details. I'm going to show you that when we get there. You have to read my novel. No, I'm kidding. This is amazing. So I found this letter. So I'm going to read it out to you because you might not be able to see it. This letter tells you who this woman was. So I did not know who read this a few times. This was her birthday celebration, and it was a little letter. It's stuck in one of these books. So it says, will you please insist on Miss Curry sitting inside the room and not standing in the hall as usual? Will you ask her to sit next to you? Then she will. That tells you right there. Then they have a list of the songs that they're going to play, remarks from Mrs. Montgomery, musical talent, remarks by friends, blah, blah, blah. And then they're asking to have the mothers and young people, each one of them to come up and say something about how much she did for them. And then it says, okay. It says, please present the gift to Miss Curry. A thermos night bottle, I'm not sure what that is, which we think will be a comfort to Miss Curry in summer and winter. Please emphasize the fact that this gift comes from all the organizations at the nursery, and that we still have a sum of money on hand, which we will hold until Miss Curry has the chance to buy for herself just the article she wants the most. We have several things in mind, but are uncertain which one she would like most to have. And if we were to give her the money tonight, tomorrow she would spend it in the work, and our gift is for herself. It tells you everything you need to know about this woman. It was all about the work and the children. So I think there's two slides. There's two.
This is the
Second one, okay, yes, thank you. Okay, this is another little note that tells you who was Sara Curry. So somebody wrote her a note. It's hard to read, so I typed it on the next slide. You'll see what it says. Miss Curry, will you kindly do me that favor which I asked you Tuesday night and lend me a few dollars, as you know that I told you that I was in hard luck, being that I'm not working now, but expect to go back to work again soon, and I will gladly pay you back again in a short time, and I will let you hold my baby insurance until I pay you back again. You will grant me that favor, and I will never forget you, Miss Curry, hoping that you are not offended for me writing to you. And if you go back to the previous slide, her answer, please call at the nursery Wednesday, November 28th, I guess it was Thanksgiving, between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. Yours truly. So obviously she's going to just give. All right, now to answer that young lady over in the corner there, who attended Little Mish? I don't know if you can see this too well, but you can see some of the names: Jules Wagner, Lily Weninger, Ruth Weiss, Morris Wallach, Julian Wagner. You can kind of see some of the places. I don't know if you can read where they came from. Russia, Hungary, Romania. I think there's some from Ireland there too. And we can go to the next one and look at some of the parents' names here on this here. Thomas Vignucci, I guess that's Italian. Laura Zuckerman, Sydney Zins, Lizzie Zakaridge. So they're all the names, and they come from, again, Hungary, Italy. So I'm guessing, you know, if we went through every book, I'm going to guess that this corresponds to various things that were going on in Europe at this time. I think these ones were around 1907. So I don't know if there were pogroms going on in Europe at that time, but I bet if somebody had the time to go through all these books, and if anybody wants to, they're very welcome, you could see correlations between the different events that were happening in various countries around the world. This one, yeah. New York, yeah, Russia. Can you see those? Romania, Hungary, yeah.
Europe.
Yeah. Now, here's an interesting thing that I found. This is fathers here, and I don't know if you can see here. Flipper going, everything going here. See what that says there?
Deserted.
Deserted. See this here, deserted? Do I have another father's slide? Yeah. Let's see now. Let's see. Is there any more? Yeah, deserted. There's a lot of deserted dead. So I thought to myself, gee, those guys are a bunch of jerks, right? Next slide. Now, this is interesting. We're going to go back to the same one we read at the beginning and look at what's in red.
Right.
This policy solution provided state aid to women with young children who lacked male support. Pretty sure they weren't deserted or dead. I'm pretty sure that this lady, fine lady, said, oh, deserted, fine. So women had to, they really didn't want women to work then. They didn't want to give them the support. They wanted women to stay home. Things change over history, but I thought that was interesting that that would say a lot of deserted dads. Employment. Okay, this is also in the book. They were asked like where they worked. So let's see what's over here. So that's on 708 East 13th Street, ground floor. It sounds like the name of a store, Harold's or something like that. Look at where this person works. Astor Place subway station. I didn't even know there was there a subway station back then? I mean, there must have been, right? It says it right there. And I think this is like early 1900s. Yeah, I'm going to look at the next one too. So 43 Mercer Street, there was a restaurant. I guess it was a cool place back then too. This person worked on East 14th Street, Oberlander. I don't know what that was. It could have been a store or something. Let's see, laundry. This person worked on East Houston Street, St. Augustine's Chapel. That's no longer there. That's a big high-rise there now. But I guess so what we looked at the beginning, and if you do read the Jacob Rees book, that paints a very, very dismal portrait of the children that were left out. Children died. I think the parents that came here were a little different, because they had a place to live, and they had addresses, and they had work. So it's slightly different than that would have been in, say, the Children's Aid Society. There were a lot of abandoned children, so this was slightly different, I think. Employed. Now look at this one here, born in Hungary, and they worked on East 17th Street in a hand embroidery company. So a lot of manual work, yeah. So here you can see, this is 1922, so 130 children a day, and that's anybody good at math? How much did everybody pay every day? 10 cents. I think it's, I'm not the best at math, but I think it's 10 cents, and then 10 children free.
Yeah,
but
10
cents was
worth more.
Right. So I think too. I was also in that book, the Jacob Rees book. A lot of these places didn't want to give things free. They wanted people to work and to feel dignified, and yeah. And actually, some of the children in some of these other places, they gave children like shoe polish and things to get out there and start businesses, and they'd have to pay for those until they got their own little business going. So. And on Saturdays too. So I think the only day off less children maybe on Saturday, but they were here Saturday. And I think this one is hilarious because, do we have this typed out? I may not have sent you this. No, okay, sorry, I typed this out. To me this is hilarious because if you had any idea what we have to go through with the DOH and the DOB and this and the that, just even run this nursery. So they just wrote on a scrap of paper, these signatures would release us from any dangers that may happen to these children when they go to school until they return. Boom, okay, we're covered. So scribble on a scrap of paper. And this one, okay, this is interesting too. Bellevue Outpatient Department. I don't know the date on this one. This is to certify that the rash on the child's body is due to excessive perspiration and is not contagious. Now, here's a really interesting thing about this. The day that I sort of found this, I found it before, but I was photographing it for you guys. The very day that I got this, one of the teachers came to me in a panic. My child has spots, I have to run, you know, I think it's monkeypox, I don't know. So I said, it's probably just a rash, you know, but she went to the doctor and the doctor said, sure enough, it's just a rash. So I thought about that there were times when contagion was major, which it is now, so we can really relate to, like if I showed you this like 5 years ago, you'd be like, oh, that was back then. So we know that viruses and contagions were rampant. I think TB was rampant at that time. There was another one. There was other
Meningitis was.
Huh?
Meningitis,
really,
yeah.
back then? Yeah. Typhoid, stuff like that, yeah. Typhoid Mary. So it's kind of relevant, yeah. Okay, what do they eat? What are the stuff that they order? I don't know if you can read this either. You can see it on your slide. Well, they got vegetables. There's coffee featured very large on here. And it was probably for the teachers. I'm not sure why. Maybe they gave it to children back then. It's possible. Maybe. Lard, meat, veggie, and then the prices over on the side there. So they kept a careful log of everything that they spent and everything that came in.
Kitchen outside.
Oh yeah, we'll go downstairs. Yes, I want to take you guys downstairs. I believe that the downstairs. So this is like an upstairs-downstairs house. You know, it was actually owned by a family, as far as I can figure out. Back in like 1830, I think it was built. I learned that last time you did a presentation here. So I think a wealthy family lived here. This was a fancy house on a fancy street, I think. And then they moved on, and there were various inhabitants here, and then it turned into a boarding house, and then it went into foreclosure, and so somebody donated it to Sara Curry. So, and the mortgage is $20,000. I don't think they donated it 100%, so I think she had to pay some of the mortgage. So it cost $20,000 back in 1901. Okay, so here is a list of donors, and I just wanted you to see that there are pages and pages of these donors. So I'm guessing this is like a monthly thing or something, and maybe there was an invitation to something, or...
You have any idea why they're crossed?
I'm guessing they donated something, or they didn't want to donate something, or they're coming to a party, or they're not coming, or something like that. I'm not sure why they were. It's hard to see names. You know, I wish I could trace down all of these people. I tried, you know, that in itself is just fascinating. To just take one or two of these names and find out who these people were, you know.
Ozone Park, Long Island. That's
Yeah,
funny.
yeah, right?
Yeah.
But at the time
It was Long Island, yeah.
Oh, it was on Island?
Yeah.
No zip codes or anything? Yeah. Now, the major donors, somebody asked me that already. Mr. and Mrs. Clarence Peacock. Master Alexander Roland Peacock. So they're the major donors, and to this day, I think we probably would have, when I arrived here, things were really not doing so well. The only thing keeping us together was a thing called the Peacock Fund. So it was donated by this particular family. I can't find too much about them, actually. Gilbert Plimpton, I looked him up, and he's an interesting character too, but I wish I could find the relatives and ask them to come back and give us more money. That would be nice. Now, here's some more Richardson. Rolston. Okay, so the Rolston and Peacock family combined, and I think one of them, I don't know which was which, but they married into each other. So the Rolstons were, that entire family was very generous. Okay, I'm going to give you a little quiz now here. See this here? Jean Rolston, and they lived on the upper, a lot of them lived in New Jersey, must have been a fancy place to live, and New York, it still is. Is anybody from New Jersey? It's still amazing, no, they're not, okay. So Plainfield, New Jersey, and then upper west side and upper east side here. So Jean Rolston lived on West, she's part of that family, West 78th Street. What do you notice about that handwriting? Notice it's different from the others?
Up and down.
What would you say about the person who wrote that? I happen to know, so
Are these their own, this is
yeah, they
not
yes.
the individuals writing?
I think it's their yes. I think it's their signatures. Yeah, I think it is actually. You're right. Even though people just similar
I
handwriting.
don't know, left-handed?
Well, it's a combination of the up and down quality.
That's a child's handwriting.
Yeah.
It's a child's handwriting.
Well, but there's also something about the way the T's are crossed.
Yeah.
That's a kind of determined and somewhat aspirational.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So, okay, that ties in with that question that I was asked. Okay, and this story is in the book. This was a little girl, Jean Rolston, who I think she's the one who married into the Peacock family. So this wonderful story is in the book there, how, I guess her father was involved on the board or something, and she came in and found out about what was going on here, and so she decided to have a lawn sale. I guess they had a house in upstate or in New Jersey, and to get money for the school, and then she is the one who persuaded her father to give a building so that the children could live in the building. That's the story,
Live in the building? That's lived here?
No. This was, I'm not 100% no, but it's called a day nursery. So, but there are photos, and you'll see them in the book. There are photos of things that look like cribs. So it's possible, And actually I see a lot of older children in there too, so I'm not sure, I have to dig a little further. But they called it a day nursery. I do not know why they called it a day nursery. Maybe they did sleep here. See, I don't know. But this Jean Rolston is really, a very important person in the history of the school. I probably didn't cover any of the history of the building or anything. Do you want to ask questions about anything?
So tell us what you know about what the mission was when it was founded, and to the extent it still has that mission.
Okay, so the mission was to let people work and get better lives. A lot of them would be immigrants,
And that
who...
would mean women in particular.
Women, yes, it would be. Families, so she wanted to let them, have a good life, and I think she was, she did see that thing happen on the street, and she must have been heartbroken to see those children out on the street. So she thought, well, I wanted to take care of them, So today, we still serve working parents. Parents need to go to work, even more than before. Women are working. I mean, if the school went into decline, maybe that was in the 50s and 60s, maybe women weren't working so much. But now it's really needed, So we're still doing the same thing, yeah.
Do you know from looking at it if it was similar to other nurseries and what that was done here? I know that you've mentioned before that mothers were taught to do things as well. It wasn't.
Yes.
It was a community.
That's right.
center
That's right.
that
And we'll look at the kitchen below, and there. I want you to take your books with you when we go down, because she did cooking classes. I think she had sobriety meetings, because people, used alcohol because their lives were so rough, then. And she had cooking classes for children. So she opened the doors here and had huge feasts for Thanksgiving. She gave food away. So the tables were, she was tiny, by the way. She's a little missionary. She's probably 4 feet or something. So they said they couldn't even see her behind the tables loaded with food. So that was her mission, to not only take care of the children, but take care of the families. So we try to do that here. We have parent workshops, and we try to take care of families here too. So that's still our mission. Yeah.
What could you say something about currently? What kind of children come here, and how do they get in? How long is the day?
Well, the day is they come in, at 8 or 8:30. They stay till 3 or 5:30. So they're all working families, mostly middle class. They wouldn't be homeless children, which would be a really wonderful thing to do, but they're not homeless, so they're middle class, working class parents, and children are here 5 days a week, yeah. How do they get in? They apply, and we
And
try to
they pay?
yeah, because it's a non-profit, we have to pay the teachers, we don't get any funding from anybody. We're lucky we don't have to pay rent, but we have all the other expenses, health insurance and salaries and, all that. So we barely make it, honestly. Yeah, there's not a big slush fund anywhere, which, I'm going to be locking the drawers shortly. But if anybody, I think that'd be a great opportunity if anybody wanted to look into these actually, it was, there's another note in the book about Mrs. Rockefeller gave Sarah a fur coat. I have a photo of her in a fur coat. So there were very wealthy people that helped her out, but yeah.
You could get money, but you've decided that there's certain things you're not willing to do, correct? Or is that not something you want to get into?
I don't know what you're going to What, like a Disney sponsorship?
Some of the, the city stuff that
The city
There are
funding,
things
yeah.
there are things that-
We're facing a big challenge now. The city has decided to bring in UPK and 3K, which I think is a great idea. I don't think people should have to pay, but they're not giving enough money.
Yeah,
You can't
that's a
survive.
Leanne thought, not a village preservation thought.
Yeah, it's impossible to survive on the money they give you, so I don't know what they're thinking. Also, you're trading in your unique philosophy. I have 3 books up there that I've written. What I have been lucky enough to be allowed to do here, and parents do love it, is to have a philosophy of emotional education. So we teach children what they're feeling, to name it, and to not manage them, but to teach them how to manage themselves and to talk to one another. And so the 10 steps to an emotionally healthy child, the Children's Bill of Emotional Rights and Emotional Education, and these parents just love it. And the children run into school every day and they're listened to, whether they're angry, whether they're sad, whether they're lonely, whether they're worried. We want to hear all of that, and we want them to be able to communicate with other people, not to keep their feelings inside. So people like that. Yeah.
Question about
Yeah.
Sara Curry.
Yeah.
You have already covered it, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
What was who was she connected with? How did she, was she would you say she was part of the progressive era?
Yes,
But the movement in terms of,
Yeah.
was she connected with anybody, like the Jane Addams type people?
That's a good question, because
House
yeah.
people in particular.
Or Lillian
So
Wall
many
was
separate
Yeah.
houses.
If you go
yeah,
back to the
person.
slide where she's at the birthday party, it says there, okay. It says, things that the Helping Hand, Mother's Meeting, no, that's not it. There's some organization, the Helping Hand, yeah. That was an organization, I looked that up, the Helping Hand. That was all over the country. So she started, I guess they had little chapters or something around the place, and she was, so I bet she was involved with a lot of that. She's featured in a lot of books around that time. You'll see that when you read that little booklet there. She was famous. That photo came from a Harper's Magazine article about her. So she got herself out there, and I don't know, maybe it was a different world back then, but it was maybe easier to reach donors, or easier to get your message out there, or part of that movement. Maybe that
The
movement.
settlement house movement, it would
Yeah.
have aligned with it if it wasn't actually
Yeah.
part of it.
Right.
Did she have, who worked with her here?
Now, I don't know, but I think I read somewhere that she helped women who might otherwise go on a bad path. So I think she helped everybody, from employees to parents. She just helped everybody. So I think she brought people in to work here that needed help too.
Well, that would have been very different from the settlement house movement,
Oh,
right? Because in the settlement house movements, you had affluent college students,
Oh.
okay, or recent
Mhm,
grads
mhm.
park themselves in a settlement
Oh.
and for the betterment of the poor, quote unquote.
Interesting,
You know,
yeah.
which would be different than what you're
I think
describing.
about, yeah, as far as I can tell, I forget where I read that, but I think I saw that she wanted to help people who needed
That would
work.
be different.
Yeah,
That would be
yeah.
interesting,
Mhm.
and less patronizing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, so these people could relate to, yeah.
But she was doing things that they were doing, you know, as far as like,
Yeah.
cultural,
Mhm.
you know, acclimation and
Yeah.
teaching immigrants, you know, how to function in this.
Yes,
this world
yes,
kind of
yes,
thing.
yes, yeah.
You know,
That's right.
like progressive
Yeah.
type stuff.
Yeah. I didn't know really about that progressive movement.
Oh,
until
yeah,
I
it was huge.
Was it?
This
Yeah.
time, yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
But what I would be fascinated by, and I will find your email address and I will follow up with you, is that this area, which was of course part of the Lower East Side at the
Mhm.
time,
Mm.
was just a hotbed of progressive activism.
Yeah.
So
Right.
for her, she would have to be connected with those other movements or have feelings about them.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. I always picture her as a lone person. I'd say this is interesting to me to
But
think
it
of it
was
that way.
such a hotbed,
Yeah.
yeah.